Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, and let's see, somebody chatted. Who's chatting? Okay, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah, it was me asking for
okay.
video audio.
Um, okay, so we're now recording and broadcasting. Today is Wednesday, November 6th, um, 2019, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of ITSE 2309 at Collin College. And let's see, we have, with respect to Wednesdays, we have today, we have the 13th, we have the 20th. The 27th, we're going to be off for Thanksgiving. They break, it used to be they wouldn't break on a Wednesday. Um, and we come back and we're here on the 4th. The final, for those of you who choose to take it, will be on the 11th. If you need to make up, particularly test one, the final is has a lot of test one to it. You will have to take the final, and you will have to take the final on Wednesday. Um, I'm not going to make you come in here, but you'll have to take it on Wednesday. Um, I'm not going to have the luxury of leaving it open for a long time. Um, this is because I've got to get my grades in. So that'll be it. If you need a makeup, or if you need the final will be essentially a makeup. If you are happy, you do not need to take the final. Okay, you can just take your average the way it is. Oh. I mean, I just won't. The final won't count. It doesn't count as a 0. Doesn't count as 100. It just doesn't. Um, let's see what else. So I got about, let's see, we got today and 2 other days. So today we've got test 2 out. Guys, I don't want anybody to miss test 2. So you need to get that in. I think I put it, what day did I put for the, okay, it is due November 8th. Okay, I've got it due, today's the 6th. So I've got it due on Friday. I'm willing to listen to some feedback, but I'm not going to be real happy if anybody just misses it. Okay, I'm not going to do a makeup on it per se. In other words, I'm not going to write another test. So um, if you miss the test 1 and you miss test 2, you're kind of sunk. You don't want to do that. And some people did miss test 1, but you can take the final. So got a couple of them in. So you got 2 more days. Might be talked into leaving it open until Saturday, but so I'll listen to anything if somebody wants to ask about it. Let's see. For today, we're going to look at the next module, and I'm going to start that module. The next few modules are they're not real difficult. They are more advanced. So the idea of what I'm going to talk about, module 12, 13, and 14 is database design. So these start to be a little bit higher level programming modules. And we've essentially done most of the plain old SQL stuff. So from here on out, we're going to be on a little bit of a higher level. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is database views. Let's see what we have here. This is what you will do. Here is here's a tutorial working with database views, and it is chapter 13. There are the PowerPoints. And here's, and simply, very, very simply, in database, all databases treat them about the same way. So whether you're in SQL Server or Oracle, create view works the same way. Now this is another create statement. And anytime, so when we had the last create statement, we were creating tables. We're not going to create a table. This time we're going to create a view. But if you ever see that word create, anytime you see the word create something and some code with it, rest assured that you in SQL Server, you should bracket it with go statements. You have a go before it, a go immediately after it. Okay, that's true with database tables. Should be true. It doesn't always make you do that with database tables, but sometimes you get some strange errors if you don't go, if you just try to go through in a batch. So you need to have a go before it and a go after it, or you can have it in its own file. Now, if all you have in that file is the create view statement, then you don't need goes. It's got to be in its own routine. And that's what Go does. Go breaks it into two different programs. So if I've got select from where, Go, select from where, those are two different programs. What does that mean to you at this stage of your life? Nothing. What does it mean in the next class? It gets important in the next class. So basically, let's go and see one of them. Okay, here is a select statement. Let's make it nice and easy. A select query that returns all fields for vendors who reside in California, where the vendor state is CA. So it's pretty simple. Select everything, select star from vendors where vendor state is equal to CA. Now, I don't use select star real often. Because that's going to give me everything, and that's okay, but usually I like to have a little bit more control over it. If I want to rename them or something, so I'll usually list them. If I want all of them, I'll just list all of them. But in this case, I got lazy. Sometimes I do that. So select everything from vendors where the vendor state is equal to CA. Pretty straightforward. We run it, and we see the state, everything. It says, I will usually not select the state, by the way. If I'm going to say that vendor state is equal to CA, why do I want to see the state? I know it's going to be CA, but I guess it's good because I can see that it's working. Okay, here's the view. Let me go over and get me a new query. What did I do with my, I can't believe I shut down my database. Okay, here we go. Connect. And let's take this. Okay, so here is my query. Paste. And if I execute it, I see everybody who's in California, what I get. I got 75 rows. A lot of people in California. That's fine. Now, if I want to make this into a view, create view, California vendors. So I'll change that a little bit. I guess I'll get the whole thing. So I create the view and California vendors as. Now notice it's making it red, and it's making it red for a reason. It's making it red because I don't have the go in the right place. So it's going to tell me right away if I put the mouse on it, it says create view must be the only statement in the batch. So this is the batch, this is the file. So to make it the only statement in the batch, he needs to have a go. That breaks it into two of them. And if I have anything else in that file after it, I will need a go after it. If I don't have anything after it, I don't have to have a go. But I usually will go ahead and put one anyway. because it doesn't hurt anything. And I'm famous for forgetting to do it. And then I get an error message, and I hate it when that happens. Now, notice that I have the select statement up here. I don't need this select statement up there. It's not doing me any good at all. What I have down here, so I can just comment that out. Not run it if I want to, just have it there to refer to. So this is the statement it's based on. So I create a view, and this is going to create something that is in the database. I say execute, and I got the message that the command completed successfully. What completed successfully? Creating the view. So it now exists. If I were to go over and look at my Object Explorer, and I were to go to the databases, and I were to go to the APDB databases, notice that I have one folder in there called Views. If I open that and look at it, System Views, I think.
You were in the Advanced DB when you created that.
No, I'm in APDB.
I know, but at the very top, your drop down.
Thank you very much. I'm at the I'm ADVDB. Okay. Well, I get after everybody else for that. So it's up here in this one. Okay. I have a different. I have two. So there's California vendors. I get after everybody for not using. Now, if I create the view, whether I highlight go or not, now it exists. I got two of them. Might as well delete them. So now in my views, I'll need to, sometimes it doesn't always refresh. Sometimes you have to close it down, select it, refresh, open it again. There, they came back. So it doesn't always refresh. These are two completely different processes running, and they don't always talk to each other real quickly. So now this view exists, and if I were to select from that view, select star from California vendors. Sounds like a song, California Dreamin'. And boom. I see the same 75 rows that I got from the select statement. So what does a view do? A view simply saves the a query, a select from where query, as a table. It looks to you like it's a table. It acts like a table. It has all of the rights and privileges of a table. I can select from it. In fact, I can insert into it. I can delete out of it. I can update it most of the time. I say most of the time. I'm going to talk about when can I update it and when can I delete from it and all that stuff. A view can be based on any SQL statement, but not a view that is based on any SQL statement does not mean that you can update it. For example, suppose I were to include in that view something like something like this. Select min vendor zip code, or yeah. Now, this is a legal view. By the way, I will, I'm going to have to drop the view, and do I have create or alter? Sometimes it will let me do create or alter. I never can remember. Oh. Okay. Yes, you can do create or alter. If you have an older version of SQL Server, meaning you are, I think, pre-2016, if you have 2012 or something like that, it will not have the option to create or alter. You will have to do it just like you do with the tables. And if the object ID California vendors is not null, drop view California vendors. You can do it just so that will work. But create or alter I like better. I wish they would put one create or alter table, but they don't have create or alter table, and none of them that I know. There must be a reason why they don't have that. But create or alter view, it does let me do that. In the later versions, Oracle has create or replace. So it does the same thing.
You had like changed the statement like you did read the aggregate function and leave just create new California vendor tool from an error?
Yeah, you have to say create view, give it a name, then you have as, and the as has to be an SQL statement. So the question was, is the SQL statement required? The answer is yes, it is. Okay, so the view is, but how can I, if I were to execute this? So let's execute him. Boom. And he updated successfully. And I say select from California vendors. And what do I get? Well, the minimum zip code that I have in there is 90025. What would it mean to update that table? If I updated that view, how could I update that view? Which row in the underlying table, i.e. the vendor's table, which row would I update? I don't know that it's a single one. It could be multiple rows. So if I try to set it, I want it to be 90035, and I try to change it, but that's not the minimum. So if I have an aggregate function, any kind of updating it is out. But if I just have select everything, when I have this one, now if I do an update, I know which one I'm going to update. So if I executed something like delete from California vendors, well, let's try it. Let's see, vendor ID is 4. That's the lowest one I've got. That's one I've got there. So if I say delete from California vendors, where vendor ID equals 4. So now I'm deleting from the view. If I execute this, I'm going to delete that record. Boom. And now when I go back and look at him again, he's not there. And he is not in the underlying table either. I changed the table vendors. The view California vendors is based on a table under it. Now, it is possible to have a view based on a join. I can join tables, create a view as, and I can join two tables. I can create a view with a subquery in the query. So I can create a view based on anything, inner join, outer join. If I am going to update that view, I have to update in such a way that it resolves exactly what I want. It's clear to the system what I want. If I have a join, and I say to delete from the join where the child table is 23, for example, it would delete that. Why? Because there's no dependency there. It can resolve. I know exactly where that child table record is 23. I know that I can delete it from the child table. If I said where the parent record is 5, it would not delete that because I don't know how many children I've got. I don't know I didn't tell it what to do with it, right? So in some cases, it's obvious what to do. In general, if you say select everything, or you select everything, when you select from the parent table, if you have selected all rows that are required, anything that you have a not null constraint on, if it's required, or so you have to select it, or you don't have to select it if it is defaulted, then you would be able to insert, update, delete on that table. But I cannot, if I don't select the primary key in the view, so for example, here I have the vendor ID and the vendor name and all of those required in there. If I didn't have that, if I didn't have the vendor ID in the view, I would not be able to insert into the view. Where have we seen something that's like a view before? We've seen some. Subqueries, yes, they were in subqueries. What kind of a subquery is like a view? A derived table. A derived table is a view. A derived table is you're taking a subquery and you're treating it as a table because the output of a subquery is a table. And then you've created this view and we can join it, we can do anything with it. Essentially, you're creating a view on the select line. You're creating a temporary view. Sometimes I find it to be better, instead of doing a derived table, just to create a view. Take what I need out of that view and then I can just drop the view, or maybe I'll just leave it around. A view is inexpensive. A view doesn't cost me very much to have one. It doesn't create any new data. It doesn't take up any new disk space. Everything takes up some, but just to have the view there, I don't duplicate all of those data. Every time I select from the view, I have to go run that select from where query that's under it. So I get I pay the cost for the view. The cost is at the time that I run it, when I select from it. I don't pay anything for a view just to have it around, just to have it there. So I'm very promiscuous about creating views. I'll create one in a heartbeat. So this one, California vendors, 0 disk space. I don't duplicate any data. And that's generally true. Now, I do keep the query in the database. The database is, do you remember your access class, access? And you created a query and you gave the query a name and you saved the query. I got news for you. That wasn't a query. What was it? It was a view. And I always get mad at Access. Well, I don't get mad at Access. I mean, what good does it do to get mad at Microsoft? But that's not a query. That's a view because you're saving it and you're keeping it around. Okay, a query just exists only while you run it. Whatever. So this is an example, and any code goes here. Let's see what else we have here. Database, it looks like a table. We're able to do anything with it. Insert, update, and delete on the table. Okay. A view is most commonly used for security or privacy. In a table, I might have confidential information that I don't want you to see. The example I use for this is human resources. A person who is a human resources specialist gets to see everybody's personnel jacket, everybody's personnel record, HR record. I get to see your salary. I get to see your social security number. I get to see your date of birth, how many dependents you have. Very confidential stuff. So I'm a very confidential person. If you're working for human resources, you have a fairly high level security clearance. I get to access anybody's personnel data in the database, except I am not allowed to access human resources data. I can't access anybody that I work with. So it might look something like this. I'll pretend it's like California. Go. Okay, let's say create view. I'm going to call this HR. Sometimes I'll put view on there. Sometimes I'm gonna make him create or alter. And I usually drop down to the second line for my as. It's up to you. You could, if you put it out there on the end, I'm okay with it. I don't like parentheses that open out there, but the as is fine. I usually tab. Let's see. I'm going to pretend like state is human resources, where vendor state does not equal CA. Okay. Now let's say that that's HR. So if I were to put that, if that were HR, that's human resources, HR. Just pretend. So I can see anybody's personnel jacket where the department does not equal HR. I'm going to get a red line here because there's no such thing as department, vendor department. But I'm with HR, so I get to see anybody that is not HR. So this view is for HR. And create view, this one. But who is it that manages the HR records? Well, that task usually falls to the accounting department or finance or whoever it is that's managing the money. They are also a very high security group. I don't want somebody out in production managing the database. So I let HR, human resources people, manage everybody except HR. And this one is, let's see, what is this? This is finance, payroll. Payroll view, and this one, they get to manage everybody where it's equal to HR. So this one is for HR. Okay, and I can give you the right only to use the view. I don't have to give you the rights to the table under it. You can see anything that's in this table as long as it's not HR. Payroll gets to use this one. Payroll gets to see anything that's HR. So payroll manages HR, HR manages everybody else. Go ahead.
For example, in a real case scenario, like ultimately, where do they look at those tables? Like, will they have an SQL view, or it will be an Access?
Yeah,
or something like
probably I would give them a web page to look at. That's really in the next class. We'll create the web page. So you'd pop up a web page and you'd see however I gave it to you to see. Maybe I'll give it to you as a table. Maybe I'll give it, but when you log in with your login, you have a web interface. And that's fairly easy to do with Visual Studio. I don't know that it's easy to do, but it's like in Access, you can create these forms. And the same thing's true with this guy. It's just not a part of this class. It could be. Maybe we'll get there. But essentially, now in a view, I cannot. Let's see. Go back to this one, California. Alter view California vendors where state is equal to California. What if I said, update, see how I, oops. Update California vendors. Set. Vendor state equal to Oklahoma. Move from California to Oklahoma. Now they're getting ready for some culture shock, won't they? Where let's see, I got a 6 there, so I'll pick on him. You're perfectly free to alter to change your database any way that you pretty much want to. I would suggest going back afterwards and running the create AP.SQL database script, and it just puts it all back the way it was. I usually do that. Now, what's this one going to do? So this one's going to change California vendors. It's going to change the data under it using the view. And if I were to execute this, what's going to happen? It says 1 row affected. Now, that's interesting, but what happened to that? When I say select everything from California vendors, what happened to vendor ID 6? Well, he no longer is part of the view. Now, this is a security issue. If I am in an environment where I'm not allowed to update the HR records, I can update a record and make it be in the HR database, in the HR view, even though I'm not allowed to be there. So in general, in a view, you cannot change the data under the view in such a way that it is no longer in the view. That is a security option. I cannot use the view to alter the thing that makes it be in the view, but I just did. I just did. So this is a security breach. Possible security breach here, because I no longer have the security and the of that view. I'm going to make a slight change here.
For example, let's say somebody from HR like take data that's on like
Yeah.
the payroll and make it go to HR.
Make it go to HR.
And then since they have access to HR,
Right. So
they
I
will
could
need
see
somebody in
I could
payroll
see
to-
payrolls records. What I could do if I could see payrolls records, I could change that field from payroll to HR and send it to over, and now I can do something to it and then make it pop up in the HR view. But I can't see it anymore because now it's dropped out of my view and into another one. So I don't want that to, that just opens a big hole in the security. Everybody, you guys online, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to say, make it go. Alter view, California vendors, and that is where this last thing here with check option comes in. Where vendor state is California, and that last one with check option. If I put that on the end, that says do not allow this to be updated such that it does not appear in the view anymore. So that works. Now, when I try to do this update, and I'm going to have to change it, 6 isn't going to be there, but what would be there? I think 7. Yeah, we can change it to 7. So now I'm going to try to alter vendor ID 7 and send him to Oklahoma. And when I try to do that, but because I have put the with check option on that, execute as soon as I get that the update fails, because that would open the security hole. So views are used to enforce privacy more than, really privacy more often than security. Other ways views are used is to keep from deleting data. For example, I work for a doctor's office, let's say, a busy doctor's office, and we have SQL Server, which wouldn't be unusual at all. They might use Access, but it works the same way. I create a view called active patients. Now, one thing about a patient, if you stop being that doctor's patient, does the doctor delete all of your records? No, doctor isn't going to delete your medical records even if you die. If you stop being an active student at, what is this place, Collin College, do they delete your academic records? No, they're there forever. But you might not be an active student anymore. So you're no longer attending here. You've moved to Montana or someplace. So what happens is I have a field in your record, and I call it, the field might be active. And it is a yes/no field. It would probably be a tiny int. Some databases have a yes/no field that's built into them, a Boolean field, if you like. SQL Server does not. SQL Server used to have a Boolean field, and they tried to make it 1 bit so that they would try to pack 8 yes/nos into a single byte. It turned out to be a dismal failure. They spent more time fooling around with it and trying to get it to work. It never did work very well. So basically, you don't have Boolean anymore. That was considered a failure. And you use a tiny int, and if it's false, you put a 0 in it. If it's true, you put anything except 0. And that now you can have various flavors of true. So anyway, anything you can do with 256 different values. I usually set 0 is false and 1 is true, but 0 and not 0 is also commonly used. So I would have something like active would default to 1. When I put a record in, I don't even have to put that in there, it just defaults to 1. So I put a new student in or a new patient in. 1, they're active. They stay active until they aren't active anymore. Then they leave my practice. Instead of deleting the patient, I just go into the record and I set that active field from 1 to 0. Now he or she doesn't show up in my view. I still have the patient's records, and I have a view called active patients and a view called inactive patients. Now, which one is it? Well, if I don't find them in the active patients, I go look in the inactive patients. And I guess I could go look in all patients. I mean, I have a table for them, but basically I can see my active patients, and if I delete somebody, I don't really delete them. I just set that record to 0, and now I don't see them. They might as well be deleted for all I care. And in fact, you can set it to where when you do delete it, instead of deleting it, you just change that record, just in case somebody does try to delete it. That's for the next class, though. Okay, what else do we have here? Would fail. Okay, so we can't cause it to drop out of the view. Benefits provided by the view are design independence. Data that are accessed through the view are independent. If you change the underlying data structure, I can leave the view looking like it always did. For example, I might want to add a field. I don't like adding fields to my database. I can do it, yes, but it really creates problems. It's very difficult to do. I do what we call fragment my database. And I like to do it at a time when I have 2 hours to shut the database down and add the record. But what I can do, I can create a view that makes it look like I've added a field to the view. So I always like views. Give my clients a view instead of giving them access to the table. That way, if I make a change to the table, as long as I keep what they see to be the same, even though I've changed the data radically, if what they see remains the same, they don't care. Security views may be created that allow only users to see it, accommodate different needs, hide the complexity of retrieval from the. I like to keep my users fairly simple. I find that most people do not speak SQL. Very unusual to, and not only that, you don't want somebody that speaks SQL because they get into trouble. So you try to keep your users quiet and happy. It's a little bit like being on an airplane. You don't want the passengers to know everything that's going on in the cockpit and on the flight deck. Update within certain restrictions, a view can insert, update, and delete to and from the base table. It has restrictions on that, but not all. Okay, let me keep going here. Normalization, invoice total did not depend on the invoice ID. We're going to get this one. This one's a little bit out of order. Okay. We have a saying in database about code, and I'm going to revisit this one. I'm referring to something that comes in a later module just down the road. I used to have that normalization module coming here, and so I guess I need to change this example. If you look at the data, and you look at the invoices, go to tables. And I look at the columns of invoices, and I have a field here called invoice total. Now, how do I get the invoice total? I'm going to edit the top 200 rows so I can take a look at it. Invoice total. What is invoice total? It's just a number. It's money. Where does it come from? It's put into the database. Okay. What is it based on? Okay. Well, what's that? Payment total. Yeah, payment total. So the invoice total should be the payment total plus the credit total. And can we find an example of it? Okay, here's one. Payment total plus the credit total is the invoice total, but it's not really done that way. That's just a number. Well, what would happen if I changed it? Let's give them a penny. Okay. So I just added a penny to that one. Now it's not true anymore. Right? I'm off by a penny. Oh no, it could be off by $100 just as easily. So it's based on something else. So it's the payment total plus the credit total. But let's get a little bit more with it. Let's look at invoice line items and look at the columns of invoice line items. And if we were to do that, edit the top 200, I would find the invoice ID, invoice sequence number. For example, here's invoice 12. Notice that he has 4 invoice line items. This is terrible, by the way. This is a terrible way to set up a database, and I suspect that I'm going to just really rail on this one, but I think that the reason they did it this way was just so that the instructors would have something to say about what are these stupid people doing. You know, we love to be able to say things like that about the textbook, but that's why they did it. So the account number, each of these guys comes from a different account number. Notice the invoice ID is 12 here, and they have sequence 1, 2, 3, 4. The invoice line item amount, if I add up these 3 guys, that gives me the invoice total. So the invoice total isn't just a number, it is the sum of those guys. So you add up all of the invoice line item amounts grouped by the invoice ID, and that gives you the invoice total. Well, duh. But what happens if I change that? If I go in and I throw a fit, I run into the manager's office with my hair on fire, and this has to change. Okay, fine. I can change it, but I have to keep the invoices table looking like it does. So that's where I would use a view. See what I say here. Okay, select sum as invoice total. If we were to, so this one is this is how we get the invoice total. Select the invoice ID, sum invoice line item amount as invoice total from invoice line items grouped by invoice ID. Now I would see it. Now I would see the numbers I want. So I would see the invoice total. I've selected it. And then we create a view of that. And notice I do a join on it. I'm going to, and once I like it, I create a view, and I'm naming my view new invoices. The whole idea is this new invoices doesn't have the invoice total field in it. It has a sum field in it. So if I change anything over there in the invoice line items, if one of those rows changes, the invoice total changes. And I'm going to talk more about this. I'm going to come back to this in just a moment. But if I were to create view, let's see, how do I want to do this? So this view has an invoice ID in it. Other thing about a view, when you create a view, you must name all of the aggregate fields or derived fields. Anything that's derived, anything that's an aggregate, anything that is the sum, if you add two things together, you must give it a name. So the rules are the same as for a derived table created in the from line. Let me see.
What is it that is bad practice to the invoice sequence like just 1, 2, 3, 4?
Well, why is it bad practice? The question is, why is this bad practice to have invoice ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. Notice here we got 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Got a lot of ones there. Now, what is it that gives me the answer? The thing that is the primary key of this one, if you look over here, you see that the primary key of this table, invoice line items, is 2 columns. It's invoice ID and invoice sequence. I do not like that. I do not like having it that way.
But how is it that it's on the table is like the primary key and it's repeated? Like how does the table allow it to be done?
Because the fact that they are both the primary key means that both fields must not be null, and together they must be unique. So the only thing that I have to have is I cannot have another record, the invoice ID 12 and invoice sequence 1. Okay. Now, how could I get away from that? Well, it would be fairly easy. Instead of making the invoice ID and the invoice sequence be the primary key, I would just make the invoice sequence be the primary key. Invoice ID is a foreign key. Well, the invoice ID, it's not a foreign key, but it could be a foreign key. Referencing the invoice table, invoice sequence number is the primary key. Now, I would not be able to use 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. They're going to have to be unique. So I would just start numbering them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This one would be 12. This one would be 13. But notice that these two, what's different about this? So this one would be, this would be 12, 12, 12, 13, 12, 14, 12, 15, 13, 16, 14, 17. Now, could I get all of the invoices that went with invoice ID 12? Nothing to it. Select where invoice ID is 12. It doesn't bother me a bit that they are different, that the sequence numbers are 15, 16, 17, and 18, or whatever they were. Doesn't bother me a bit. I can still tell you exactly what invoice they belong to by just looking at the invoice ID field. So you can have 100 invoice line items. It doesn't bother me any that they aren't numbered the same way. There's nothing that says they have to be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. There's nothing that even says they have to be numbered in order. I don't care. The database will take care of that for me. So that's the way I would do it. I get rid of a double foreign key every chance I get. The other problem that this database has is that the invoice total is really the sum of these. So let's see if we can fix that. So let me. Okay, I thought I had it. Copy. Paste. Okay, so right now, the invoice ID, this is the invoice total. When I execute that, these are my invoice totals. So for invoice ID, then I add up the invoice line items from here. Look at number 12, the invoice total is $662. I didn't enter that. That's the sum of the invoice line items. So that I just grabbed that just to show that I could. The next one is let's create a view out of it. So I can make it a view. Let's do that. In order to make it a view, I have to say go. So I select it. So basically, it's just this select statement made into a view. Sometimes I'll develop it like that. Now, if I say select everything from the view invoice totals, I'm going to get these data, the same thing I got here. I will get here if I say select everything from invoice totals. So basically, I've created this view that acts like I want to. I do not like having something named with a plural and something else named singular. I think that is a bad form, although it's not going to hurt anything in our database. So if I select everything from invoice totals, I see the same thing I had just a minute ago. Now, I want everything from invoices except invoice total and invoice total from the view we just created. And so we're going to use an outer join. Put these guys over here, and then we'll talk about him. So select the invoice ID, vendor ID, number, invoice date, invoice total. Now, notice that invoice total comes from a different table. So invoice total, everything else comes from I. Invoice total comes from I. The rest of them are, so invoice total is the only one that's in both of them. Payment date. Okay, from invoices as I. Left outer join, invoice totals, on, as T, on the invoice IDs. Now, what did I want? I said the left outer join. Why? Because let's see, I want everything from the invoices table and only matching ones from the invoice line items. What if I had an invalid child in the invoice line items? I just wouldn't see him in the view. I might have an invalid child in there. I don't know. I may have put one in there. When I do this, I see it looking just like the invoices. That looks like invoices. It's exactly the same thing. I have a vendor invoice ID, a vendor ID, all this stuff. But look, I have an invoice total. But where does my invoice total come from in this version? It's not just inserted into the record. It comes from this view. It's summed there. Now, if I were to update that field, right, I could not insert the invoice total into the invoices table through the view. Why? Because it's an aggregate. I can insert everything else, but I cannot insert that. What happened to the one? There are some in here, by the way, that remember this one right here, number 12? Was that the one I changed? No, which one did I change? One of those I changed. I think it was, one of them I changed by a penny anyway. So what happened to that one that it's not right? Well, it's just it's still there. The data are still there, but they don't match the sum of the invoice line items. This one is accurate. So for example, vendor ID 2 has invoice total of $40.20. Or, well, I don't know, let's look at 12. Vendor ID 12 has a bunch of them, and the invoice total is $662. Okay. Where does that come from? Invoice line item 12. Okay. $662. What would happen if I changed one of those invoice line items? Let's change one of them. Change it from 50 to 51. I have raised it by $1. Okay. So what was that, 662? Everything just changed there. Let's go back to this query. Now, he didn't change right away because I have to execute this query before I'm going to see him. But as soon as I execute the query, $662 just changed to payment total stayed at 662, but notice that the invoice total changed to 663. Now, I probably need to do something with credit total also. So credit total needs to become the invoice total minus the payment total. Has to be the credit total. Or I have to do something with it. Okay.
Then why would you go to the trouble of creating the DNFFN if you just go from invoices and just like if you change that value in the invoices table?
Well, I don't want, yeah, it's because that value in the invoices table, this value right here is not a number that's in the invoices table. It is not there. I cannot change that number because that number is based on the sum of the invoice line items. If I try to change it, wait a minute, what was that? Oh, no, I want to change that back to, it won't even let me select it. If I try to change it to 6, I can change other stuff. Why? Why can't
You're
I
not
change?
in edit mode. That's just a query.
Oh, yeah, that's the query output. Okay, so if I open this, let's see, I need to be over here in this one, I guess. No. Invoices, okay. I will need to refresh this. It's 12. Best bet is to close it and then reopen it again. Let's see, invoices. And number 12 is showing as 662. I was expecting that to be 663. Have I refreshed? I'm in the invoice line items. Why am I not seeing 663?
The 663 is going to appear in.
It's going to appear in the query because this one I haven't created the view yet. Okay. So the 663 I haven't created because I haven't created the view. That's why.
Can you change that one right there?
I can change this one. That's just a number. That's just, I can change it. If I were to create the.
Okay, because in invoices it's just a number. But if you go
Right.
to invoice, that's the sum.
Right. Is this, okay, that's a long time ago. Let's see, where was I? This one. I think if I were to create a view, and I think I do that right here. So here's where I create the view. Once I'm happy that I'm seeing everything, I'll create the view based on this guy. And the question is, can I update it? Yes, I can update it. Copy that. I think so I'm going to have to go, paste. So I'm creating the view named new invoices. Execute. And refresh. Let's see if that gets it. I usually have to close him down, refresh, then I can open him, look at the views, new invoices, edit top 200 rows. Now the invoice total for number 12 is reflecting that updated version. I do not believe that I can change that value. Why not? Because it is based on an aggregate function. So I'm going to be very surprised if it says I can change it. I expect it to stop me right here and say, Blong, no, you can't change that. So I have to escape out of it. I have to leave it there. Now I can change this one. That's just a number. But this one now, this invoice total is no longer a number. This invoice total, it looks to me like a table. It looks to me like something I can change, but I can't change it. The only way I can change it is to go into the underlying table and change the invoice line and change the invoice line items table.
That's why you go through all the trouble of creating a view for just that column.
I'll do that. Well, because that column is one that was probably going to give me trouble because I have something that is really derived from another table, but I'm treating it as a number in this table, and it should be it should be your status, your grade in the class should not be something that I enter into the database. I mean, your cumulative grade, it should be based on calculated by the system. Now, at the end of the day, I've got to figure it out, and then I enter it, of course. But the one that is showing in Canvas, how accurate that is based on not something that I enter. I cannot go in and change your average. It just is. I have to go in and change the underlying.
And when you create a table initially, let's say it's the invoice table, and you create that invoice total as an aggregate, like create the table and put invoice total minus plus payment total as whatever, and it would,
right,
like that from the beginning.
I create the tables that have the information in them that I want. Then I create the views to display the information that I want. Now, the invoice total should not be anywhere in the tables, because the invoice total isn't something that's in a table. It's derived from the sum of the invoice line items. So get it from there and then make a view out of it and show it to people as if it were a truly a view. I can do anything with it that you can do with anything else, but I cannot update it. I cannot update it. I cannot insert a value for it. So when I insert into new invoices, which is the view, I insert the invoice ID, the vendor ID, the number, the invoice date, but I cannot insert the invoice total because that's calculated for me. Nice thing about it, it'd come out to be 0 because the question then becomes what is it if I have the sum of something that doesn't exist, okay? And that could be a problem because I'm taking the sum of things in the invoice line items, but because I have the outer join in there, if I have a childless parent, it does not appear here. I have to put some children in there before I'm going to see them. And if I have children with invoice totals of 0, I'm going to see 0. Okay. And then I point out I can drop the invoices column from the table like that. I say alter table, invoices, drop column, invoice total. I don't like doing that. Why do I not like doing that? And I'm losing data.
You're altering the table.
I'm altering the table. If I alter the table, I have left a hole in that table where that column was, and I want to have time to go in and recompress and defragment my table, which is a fairly long operation. But every month or so, I have to build in time, database downtime, at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning when I can go in and do that stuff. Updating database views. I've talked about this one. It's possible to have a view, updatable view. We just showed that where I tried to update that field over here. This one, I tried to update the invoice total. I cannot update the invoice total. Can I update the payment total? I can't. I find if I try, I can update payment total. That's fine. But I cannot update the invoice total. Why? Because the invoice total is derived and the payment total is not. Okay. So it's possible to have a view where some of the fields are updatable and some are not. It would not let me delete a field. If I tried to delete a row, I do not expect it to allow me to delete. It says I'm about to, let's see, it will not let me delete it. Why? Because it has children. Now I could delete the, I can't act on these rows. I cannot insert, I can insert a new row, but I cannot insert the invoice total. And that's essentially what I'm saying here. In general, might be subject of an update if creating the view does not use the distinct or top. There are no aggregate functions, and it's not based on a union. If you think about it, that's fairly clear. Let's see, one more piece. Inserting, deleting, That's pretty straightforward. One other thing about a view. A view is a table. No, a view isn't a table. Yes, a view is a table. The output of an SQL query is a table, but it is not a table that is kept in memory. It's a table that exists just for a moment, excuse me, that's stored on the disk. So it's not taking up disk space. So it's available to you to use as a table. Therefore, a view cannot have an order by clause in it. Now, that's not entirely true. SQL Server, you can have an order by clause if you are selecting the top 10 or the top 25. Other than that, you cannot have an order by clause. Oracle will not let you have order by at all. You just have to, there's ways around it, but most of the time, just remember that in a view, a table is not ordered. A view is essentially just a non-materialized table. Therefore, it won't let you order a view either. It's best if you just think of it in terms of, I can't order a view, although you can do that in SQL Server. Do a query from the view and then take the top, do a query, order your query and take the top 25 of that. Yeah, that'd be the way I'd do it instead of putting the top 25 in the view. Okay, our practice quiz, let's see. Exercises, create view. Let's see, one, how many, what's my, so I asked you to create a view and then write a select statement. Create a view. I think I've got four views there. Total, they're worth 10 points each for a total of 40. Students usually do pretty well on this. I want you to finish the test first. Finish the test first. Did I say that again? I said that twice. I'm going to say it again. Finish the test first. Then I'll be more lenient on keeping this one open. I'm not going to close this one before the end of the semester. The test is going to close, so get your test done, get your test in, then worry about this one. And we'll be, I'll come back to it. I'll put some time in next time to answer questions about it. Questions about this particular module? Questions about anything relating to the assignments, past, present, or future? I'm going to go ahead and put a due date on this one, but I'm not going to put a cutoff date. So I'll put a due date and assign it, so it'll be out there for you to see. No cutoff date. Anybody still with me out there online?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna wrap up there for today. Let's see, we have class. When do we have class? We have class next week on the 13th. We have class on the 20th. So for the next 2 weeks, we have class. Then we're going to take off the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which I think is a good idea, well, not so much for the day classes. Boy, if you have a night class on that day, it is a nightmare. The roads are just, okay. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up there and ending the recording.